much, Peter. Thank you very, very much. You know, next year we're going to design a little revolving platform here. You folks, please, I'm not being rude, believe me. It's nice to have you all here, and I really appreciate it. This is a tremendous honor for me, I guess in a lot of ways. My wife is sitting right over here. She just became an American citizen, and that's Ivana. So I'm looking at this as really a double-header. You have so many wonderful people, so many wonderful friends at Lehigh. My wonderful brother Fred, graduated from Lehigh in 1962. And no better man was there anywhere at any time. A fabulous guy. And I see here Ray Kravis, the legendary Ray Kravis. He's here someplace, I don't know. He's such a modest guy. He'll sit up in that audience by himself with his $2 billion or $3 billion, and he'll just not talk to anybody. But he's here. He's here. And so many other. Murray Goodman, my competitor in Palm Beach, but I gave up. So I decided to do residential. He did so well with commercial. I just said, I'm going to do residential. And Murray's going to do commercial, and now we live beautifully together. He's a fabulous guy and getting a degree today, an honorary degree. I asked Dr. Likens when I first came, I said, Dr. Lehigh had called and said, would you make the speech? And I really immediately thought to my brother Fred, and I said, yes, the answer is absolutely yes. And then I called Peter Likens, who I think is really doing a great job at this school, because I've seen so many things at this school in 6 years. And I said, Peter, what did some of your other people say? What did they do? Could you send me their speeches? And he said, yes, absolutely. And I read Bill Cosby's speech, and Bill talked about graduates and parents and the importance of parents. And boy, I'll tell you what, in all fairness to all of us, without the parents, you wouldn't be here, I wouldn't be here. The parents really need congratulations more than anybody, perhaps in this room today. And we went through John Irving and Malcolm Forbes, who talked about the new communication and high technology. And it sort of shows, because Malcolm spoke, who's a friend of mine, and he spoke in 1984. And Malcolm really discussed what's happening with communication and what's really happening to steel, etc. Well, I'll tell you what, steel now is coming back. This town is maybe a little bit of an example of it. We were discussing before what's happened, and it hasn't been all Bethlehem steel. But steel is making a major comeback, and I think that has a lot to do with the fact that the Americans are getting up their backbone, and they're fighting Japan, and they're fighting these other, our so-called friends, our so-called allies, who really aren't allies at all as far as I'm concerned, and we're starting to fight back. And I think if we do it, you're going to see the Bethlehem Steels of this world really make comebacks. And then we went to my good friend, Lehigh. And I said, look, I want to read Lee's speech. I have to see it. You know, he speaks with a great passion. I said, let me hear it and let me see it. So I both listened and I read. And really what he told the graduates, this is not perhaps the greatest thing to start out with, but he said, get mad, get angry, and go out there and fight. Now, if you know Lee, that's probably pretty much what I didn't have to read his speech to see that. But he feels that way. And it was a wonderful speech, and I thought I'd speak about something else. Before I do, and before I really start something else, what I really want to discuss is a day that I spent at Lehigh many years ago. It was probably 1962 or so. In fact, my brother was here, and I was on the wrestling team of my school. And I mentioned this at the table today. I wrestled. I wrestled for 2 days, and I was in a major tournament. And it was a disaster. I weighed 175 pounds, and I came to Lehigh, and this was and is the mecca of wrestling on the East Coast, as I think most of you folks know. Now, with 2 days' experience, believe me, I was in big trouble. And at 175, we had somebody else out there who was probably better than me. So they said, Donald, why don't you wrestle heavyweight? And I didn't know any better. Hey, with 2 days, what difference? Sure, I'll wrestle heavyweight. What difference does it make? If you would have seen the guy that I had to wrestle, and he looked like Mike Tyson, except much bigger. And the results weren't great. I think he outweighed me by almost 100 pounds. And I said he had technique, he had weight, he had strength, he had every ingredient you could possibly have. But that was my first experience with Lehigh. So I have to say that one wasn't a pleasant one. My next experience, which was a very pleasant one, was when Fred graduated. And that was a great one. And now I am here today, and this is just such an honor to hear that I was voted. You never really told me, was I voted number one or not? Because if I wasn't voted number one, what the hell am I doing here? Was I? I was the first one asked. I don't know. He's a great diplomat, this man. You know. What I thought I'd discuss today, we know all about parents, and we love our parents, and we know, and it's pretty obvious what they've done for us. And I could stand up here and talk for 20 minutes about how important they are, but I think we all know that. I really wanted to talk a little bit about the negative, and that's the obstacles in your way, in my way, but the obstacles. And you're going in, and you're really one of the earliest group to go into a class of this world and get out there and fight a new obstacle, one which has just come on board and one which is probably going to be, by the time it finishes, one of the great disasters, and that's AIDS. And hopefully somebody, maybe in this room, is going to find a solution to this horrible, horrible curse, because it really is going to be an obstacle. You have the obstacles of drug abuse, you have the obstacles of alcohol, you have so many others, but that AIDS now is getting, I was this morning listening to the news, and I'm hearing statistics which are just frightening, just absolutely frightening. And I say it, and it's so negative, and I believe very strongly in both the power of positive thinking and the power of negative thinking. Without negative thinking, you're going to get yourselves in trouble. You always want to be optimistic. You always want to be positive. So many articles are written about me, and they say Donald Trump believes in the power of positive thinking. The real fact is, I love positive thinking, but it can only get you in trouble to a large extent. You've got to be aware of the downside. You've got to think negative. And when you think negative, you have to think in terms of drugs, because they're out there. And you have to think in terms of alcohol and what it can do to people. I left college. I graduated from Wharton, the Wharton School of Finance, in 1968. And I left my class, and they were in great shape. And I can tell you that 50% of that class, and that was a pretty straight school, as a lot of you folks know, 50% of that class was just decimated by drugs or alcohol. And now you people really, and I can also put all of us, I guess, in that same category. Now we have the additional obstacle of AIDS. And really what I want to say is be very careful. Be as careful as you can be, because boy, I'll tell you what, it's out there, and you don't think it. You know, when I graduated from college, we had as our commencement speaker William Paley of CBS, and he was in his prime. And he gave a wonderful speech. I will tell you, though, there was somebody else that gave a speech. It was a disaster. It was long and boring, and I wanted to get home, and everybody else in the room wanted to get home. But he gave a wonderful, wonderful speech, and he also, for whatever reason, talked about the negative, because you have to know really the negative, and you have to go out, and as Lee Iacocca said, you really have to get angry, and you have to go forward, and you have to push, and push hard, but you have to know the negative. And you don't want to push into that negative, and you want to stay away from those obstacles. On a countrywide basis, I think we've got some very, very serious problems. The other night, Ivana and I had dinner with Abe Rosenthal, who headed and did such an incredible job at the New York Times, and Gay Talese, the writer. And they used an expression which I thought was fantastic. It was the feeling of supremacy that this country had in the 1950s. It was a feeling of supremacy, it really was. And I didn't know it well. I was very young at that point, and I didn't know the feeling of supremacy. I've known that since the Vietnam War, and even a little bit before, this country hasn't had the feeling of supremacy. And what's happening is Japan and Saudi Arabia and Kuwait and so many countries are just ripping off America, left and right and down the middle, like nobody. I mean, not our enemies. Forget about our enemies. Russia, we don't deal with them that much, et cetera, et cetera. These countries, our friends, are making billions and billions of dollars and stripping us of our dignity, our economic dignity. We're a debtor nation. We're a poor nation. I came into my office about a month ago, and a friend of mine who's a real estate broker and a very successful one in New York, I really owed him sort of a favor. He did me a big favor. And he said, Donald, there's a man that wants to meet you from Japan. And I have tremendous respect for the Japanese. Hey, They're knocking the hell out of us. That doesn't mean we don't have to respect them. It does mean we have to fight back. So this man comes in. I didn't want to see him. He's one of the wealthiest men in Japan. And he walked in with an entourage of like 14 or 15 people, each one holding a seat, holding his hat, holding his chair, lighting a cigarette. And I said, "What's going on?" And he sat in the seat, and without a hello, without anything, he shouted, "We want real estate. We want real estate now." I said, "Oh, gee. Easy, just relax. I don't want to sell. I look at my friend, I say, "How the hell did you get me into this?" And even he was sort of startled. The level of intensity on this man was incredible. I deal with the biggest killers in the world. The worst killers, the worst people, and I deal with some good ones. But when you do in the New York real estate market, and you have to, I'd love to mention names, it would make big press, but when you have to deal with the guys that I have to deal with, you're dealing with some rough people. Well, let me tell you, this man, who again, one of the wealthiest in Japan, he made them look like babies. And I'm sitting there, and the first thing that came to my mind is what happens to our country when this guy and his guys around him walk into our State Department to negotiate deals. No wonder we're getting the hell knocked out of us. How are our people equipped to handle this kind of intensity, this kind of anger? And he went on and he just demanded that he wants Manhattan real estate. We want it in Manhattan. I'm sitting there, it was just an incredible experience. And then, as he warmed up, which wasn't much, I said, "I have to tell you, your country has done a tremendous job. You've totally outsmarted our very stupid politicians. Totally outsmarted them. You do it with a frown. You never act happy. You make hundreds of billions of dollars a year, hundreds of billions, and you're always unhappy." "Oh, yes, of course we're unhappy. If we were happy, you wouldn't give it to us." I said, "Absolutely." They walk into the offices of our politicians, complaining how bad. We defend Japan for nothing. And then you have problems with a Bethlehem Steel and so many other companies. We defend, they subsidize their steel, they subsidize their cars, they send their cars over, hundreds and thousands of cars. And we can't virtually sell our cars over there because it's virtually impossible, and you can ask Mr. Iacocca about that. And it's really gotten to a point, when I said to him, "Congratulations," he said, "Yes, 20 years ago, our country was down here and you were here. Now we are up here and you are somewhere here." And I'm sitting there saying, and I have to listen to this? But the fact is, they've totally outsmarted our very foolish leaders. They have economically stripped this country of its dignity, of its pride. And these are the problems that you're going right now in this incredible-looking group of students. These are the problems that you're now entering the so-called real world, because this hasn't been the real world. This has been the sheltered world. This has been a beautiful world. I look at these faces. This has been a beautiful world. But the real world is something different. And you better hope, and you better vote, and you better find the right guy to run, because I'll tell you what I'm seeing now in terms of the kind of leadership that we may have come January, these aren't the people that are going to beat this gentleman that was sitting in my office, and hundreds like him. Intelligent, smart, hatred in his eyes, absolute hatred in his eyes. And what they've done is they've won the war, and now it's coming, and I hate to single out Japan. Japan, of course, is the worst offender. But you look at Korea, you look at Saudi Arabia, you look at Kuwait. Kuwait has the highest lifestyle, living style, anywhere on this planet. People that have the lowest jobs live better than major citizens of our country. And yet we take ships in, empty, and then bring them out full of oil that they send to Japan. They sell the oil at enormous profits. We get our ships blown up, our men killed, and we get nothing. And it's ridiculous what's happening. We not only get nothing, but when we wanted to land helicopters on their soil, they said, "Absolutely not. We want nothing to do with this war." Can you believe this? We take their ships in, they bring. Why don't we get 25% of the profits they're making? Why doesn't somebody in our government ask, "Give us 25% of the profits, give us 20% of the profits, give us something"? And we wouldn't have deficits. We lose $200 billion a year. We defend Japan for nothing. It's ridiculous. We want to use minesweepers from Saudi Arabia. The minesweepers, they have the best. We can't afford them. We have garbage sitting out in Newport, Virginia, that takes us 9 weeks to get over there, and when you get them over, they don't work anyway. They're obsolete. Saudi Arabia has the best. We say, look, we're defending your waters. We're letting you live. Without us, you wouldn't even be here. We want to use those minesweepers. We want to use them. They say, no, we don't want to get involved. So I say, who the hell is doing the asking? What kind of a clown do we have representing us? Who's doing the asking? So it's a very sad situation. Thank you. I really have to say that this, believe it or not, is a message of hope in terms of you people sitting here. And it's a message of hope in that you can do better in this world by starting off at a lower base. And I believe you're starting off at a lower base. I think our country is very weak right now. I think our country is not respected. And in fact, I think it's being laughed at by a lot of the people that we are stupidly calling friends. But what it really says is that you're starting off from a lower plateau. Not a lot different than in 1975. I started in real estate in New York, and the city was a disaster. And that was a great time to start. Now, it could have gone worse, or it could have gotten better. Most people predicted it was going to get a lot worse for a long time. And New York real estate has had a boom like probably no other place in this country, maybe on the earth, from 1975. But that was good timing. That was luck. And we all need luck, because no matter how smart we are, and I've seen it, I went to school with some of the smartest people in the world, and I've seen that they got out and they were useless because they didn't understand the street, they didn't understand life, they knew how to study, they did well with their marks, they had straight A averages, some of them, but they didn't know life. And what's happening is you start off with that lower base, and you're all starting even right now, pretty even. Hey, it's still nice to get good marks, folks. I don't want to knock you, okay? If you get good marks, I think that's great. But you're starting off much more even. And I think that from a country standpoint, I believe that over the next period of 4, 5, or 6 years, that this country is going to get smart. That this country is going to say, pay for your defense. We're not doing it anymore for nothing. Pay us billions and billions for that defense. Pay us for the oil that we're getting out. Pay us for this. Reduce the taxes. You're not even talking about taxes raising. You're talking about tax reductions. All we have to do is be intelligent. Take a Murray Goodman. Let him negotiate for us. Not these people in Washington that don't know what they're doing. And I really think, where's Murray? Murray will take the job. Will you take the job, Murray? Murray will definitely take the job. And I'll tell you what, we'll be a nice, wealthy country again, and it won't take them very long. So you're starting off at a base that's interesting. You're starting off what I consider low, but there's a lot more improvement. If you were starting up here, you're not going to go to here so easily. If you're starting here, you're going to go up. And I think the class, I'll tell you what, this is one of the great experiences I've had, and I didn't realize it. I thought there might be a few people, there might be a few students. I walk into this auditorium with 7,000 people, and I'm impressed. I really am impressed. And I'm impressed by the looks of the class. It's a very handsome group of people. So I just want to say good luck to everybody. I was really honored when I heard, even if I came out number 2 or 3, which I still hear I came out number 1, but even if I came out number 2 or 3, I'm honored. I'm really honored that you chose me to be your speaker. And again, Bill Paley did a really great job. Somebody else was a disaster. He kept us in that auditorium all day long listening to words that nobody listened to. So rather than my long, cumbersome speech, I'm now going to let you people graduate and go on to the real life and do well and get mad, as Lee would say. Have a good time.